All right, let's dive right into this. When you sit down in a dark theater or flip on your TV to watch a movie today, what are you expecting? You're expecting a compelling story, right? You want characters, a solid plot, a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's just a really common assumption that cinema was born as a storytelling medium, kind of like a novel or a stage play. But here's an absolutely fascinating question to kick off our explainer today. Did movies always exist to tell stories? Well, as we're about to see from our sources, the true roots of the cinematic medium were actually something entirely different.
To give you a sense of this, there's a brilliant quote that perfectly captures the mindset of the early cinematic avant-garde. Writing way back in 1922, the French filmmaker and artist Fernand Léger put it like this: "The potential of the new art did not lie in imitating the movements of nature. Its unique power was a matter of making images seen." Think about that for a second. The early magic of film wasn't about weaving some complex, deep narrative. It was literally just about the sheer, explosive power of visibility.
So, welcome to today's explainer. I am so thrilled to unpack this material with you. We are going to explore a massive paradigm shift in film history. We'll be breaking down how the early days of cinema were essentially these wild carnival rides of visual shock, and how that purest spectacle eventually evolved and gave birth to the story-driven movies we all know and love today.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll look at the illusion of movement, then the cinema of attractions, followed by the shift to storytelling, the feature film revolution, and finally, we'll wrap up with spectacles and stories today.
Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the illusion of movement, the biological and technological spark. So, historian Alan Fisher frames the origin of movies in a really captivating way. While the rapid technological explosion of the 19th century was obviously crucial, Fisher argues that we absolutely cannot ignore the sheer human curiosity and imagination that drove the invention. He actually traces this impulse all the way back to Cro-Magnon painters in Spain, who basically willed life into the inanimate animal figures they drew by watching them flicker in the firelight. It was this innate, deeply human desire to see the impossible, to see motion where there was none, that truly set the stage for the movies.
But ultimately, the real source of cinema isn't just creative, it's strictly biological. And that brings us to something called persistence of vision. This is a physiological phenomenon where images are retained on your retina for just a tiny fraction of a second. So when a rapid sequence of slightly different still images is projected at exactly the right speed, your brain kind of blends them all together. Without this amazing little biological quirk, the continuous movement we experience in film simply wouldn't even be possible. And it was exactly this biological quirk that sparked a rapid burst of technological innovation. By 1887, celluloid roll film was being used. By 1891, Thomas Edison commissions the kinetograph. But, and here is the absolute kicker according to the text, Edison totally missed the true potential of his own studio's invention. He literally just wanted a visual companion for his phonograph, and he valued the moving picture technology so little that he declined to pay a $150 fee for an international patent. Unbelievable, right? It wasn't actually until 1895, when the Lumiere brothers projected films to a paying audience in Paris, that the communal movie-going experience was truly born. Which brings us right to Section 2, the cinema of attractions, pure visual shock. Film scholar Tom Gunning coined this brilliant term, the cinema of attractions, to describe the very specific era of film before 1906. Early cinema was what he calls exhibitionist. It was a completely plotless spectacle where actors would purposefully break the illusion. I mean, they would literally look right at the camera and smirk at the audience. It was entirely about showing off the spectacle. Now, contrast that with modern narrative cinema, which is voyeuristic. In narrative films, we watch this self-enclosed fictional world where actors act like the camera isn't even in the room. To really grasp what that early spectacle actually felt like, consider the Lumiere brothers. They famously showed a short film of a train pulling into a station, and the illusion of movement was so mind-blowing at the time that audiences were reportedly terrified, literally fleeing the theater. The whole experience was designed just to stimulate. In fact, there was a massively popular theater chain called Hale's Tours, where the theater itself was physically shaped like an actual train car. They had a fake conductor taking your tickets, and sound effects simulating the click-clack of the wheels and hissing air brakes. Going to the movies back then was a physical roller coaster ride, not a literary story. Moving right along to Section 3, the shift to storytelling, or taming the magic. A massive pivotal moment happens in 1903 with an American director named Edwin S. Porter.
In his 12-minute Western, The Great Train Robbery, Porter essentially invented cinematic syntax out of thin air. Before Porter, filmmakers basically just set up a camera on a tripod and filmed action left to right from a single angle, exactly like you're watching a stage play from the front row. But Porter changed everything. He introduced the shot as the basic unit of filmmaking. He utilized cross-cut editing to build actual suspense. He varied his camera setups between wide shots and close-ups, and he brilliantly staged action, moving from the background right into the foreground. Alan Fisher's text details this incredible narrative leap forward, but here's the really fascinating part. While The Great Train Robbery pioneered all these brand new storytelling techniques, it didn't completely abandon the old attractions format. Porter famously included a shot featuring an iconic, totally plotless spectacle. Actor Justice D. Barnes pointing his gun directly at the camera and firing point-blank at the audience. Theater owners could actually choose to place this shot at the very beginning or the very end of the film. It was the perfect bridge between the absorbing new narrative world and the old visceral shock.
And let me tell you, this hybrid formula was an unprecedented success. The public demand absolutely exploded. By 1907, just a few years later, there were 3,000 storefront theaters, known as Nickelodeons, built across America, just to keep up with the public's insatiable appetite for these moving pictures.
This kicks off Section 4, the feature film revolution, the birth of cinematic language.
Over in the United States, Thomas Edison had formed a tight monopoly called the Trust, and they made a fatal miscalculation. They stubbornly insisted that the public's attention span was just way too short, and they strictly refused to produce films longer than a single 30-minute reel. Meanwhile, European filmmakers were importing these massive 3.5-hour historical epics, while independent American filmmakers realized the Trust was totally wrong. So they fled to the sunny weather of Hollywood to escape Edison's patent enforcers, and they proved that audiences were absolutely hungry to sit down for long, feature-length stories. This independent movement brings us to D.W. Griffith, a historical figure whose legacy is deeply double-edged. As detailed in our sources, on one hand, Griffith is credited with establishing true cinematic language, innovating and adapting techniques like expressive lighting, tight close-ups, and flashbacks. On the other hand, he directed Birth of a Nation, which was an openly racist tract that served as direct inspiration for the modern Ku Klux Klan. The film was so virulently anti-Black that it actually sparked real-world race riots in 1914 and 1915. So we see a director who revolutionized the structure of the art form while simultaneously using it to produce deeply harmful real-world consequences.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Spectacles and Stories Today. The attractions live on. So did the rise of narrative storytelling completely kill off the old cinema of attractions? Well, not at all. Scholar Tom Gunning argues that the system of attraction remains a fundamentally essential part of popular filmmaking, even today. He writes, "Effects are tamed attractions." The sheer visual spectacle didn't die, it just went underground, becoming a fully integrated component of our modern narratives. Just think about the modern Spielberg, Lucas, and Coppola cinema of effects. When you go to a massive summer blockbuster today, and you watch a giant CGI explosion or a meticulously crafted thrilling car chase, that is literally the modern equivalent of the Lumiere train pulling into the station. It is that exact same pure, visceral visual stimulation running right beneath the surface of the plot, just demanding your awe. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought to ponder. Are today's special effects really just tamed attractions? The next time you sit down to watch an action-packed movie, take a second to ask yourself, are you truly absorbed in the narrative story, or are you secretly just riding a beautifully disguised roller coaster? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning what you see on the screen, and I'll catch you next time.